The vibe out there at Texas is very interesting because when we sat down with Jahdae Barron at SEC Media Days, we asked him how that team was sort of entering 2024 from an attitude perspective. And I was sort of expecting him to say, like, hey, we're hungry, we're excited, want to build on last year. And what he kept telling us repeatedly was like how angry they were, how frustrated they were. He's like, hey, last year we expected to compete for a national championship. If we're reading between the lines, there was essentially what he was telling us. He feels like this team fell short of what they were capable of in 2023. And so there's a real edge to this team. And previously at Texas, I don't know if that was always the case. I think maybe previously it was, hey, let's get to the Big 12 title game. Let's try and, make a run at this conference and play for a nice bowl game. Like, that's clearly not the vibe. Obviously, because they're not in the Big 12 anymore. That's one part of it. But the fact that they achieved what they achieved last year, heading into the SEC, this is a very, very hungry team. Texas Longhorn fans, make sure you're subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. We have had a ton of y'all over the last month to 2 months lock in with us. We have right around 60%, give or take, of our audience not subscribed. If that's you, love to have y'all a part of this. Would love to have y'all subscribe to this college football community. Thank you in advance for being dialed in. Let's have a tremendous college football season. So CJ Baxter, it's been well documented at this point, is done for the year. LCL and PCL tear. I mean, this sucks. Like, I hate every part of this. I hate whenever you have anybody get injured. It's the unfortunate reality in football is the injury rate is 100%. But like for a kid who hadn't even had his season start just yet, had a promising freshman campaign, your heart breaks for him. I'm sure he's hurting, much like Jaden Gibson is at Oklahoma. And again, we'll see what the final verdict is there. But you hate to see guys get hurt, especially with all the potential they have in front of them and what both those guys are going to do this season. But CJ Baxter at Texas, again, done for the year. Hate that. Horrible and just absolutely tragic. So your heart breaks for him. On the other side of that, in that running back room, the guys that are going to replace his production that he would have had in 2024, there's a lot of really, really talented backs. Jaden Blue is a guy that most Texas fans know. Great speed, very shifty. And Joe Cook, when he and I were talking earlier this morning, he reminded me, he's like, if there is some concern around Jaden Blue and his versatility and him running between the tackles, like what he's going to do on the inside zone, he said, think back to the Iowa State game this year. When Jonathan Brooks, I believe that was his first game without Jonathan Brooks, and they had to put the game on ice against Iowa State, who'd they hand the football to? Jaden Blue. So there's a tremendous amount of confidence, I have to believe, within that building in Jaden Blue. I think that he is someone who is poised to have a really good season now with CJ Baxter not in the lineup, unfortunately. I think he'll step up and do a great job. 2 other names to know, though. Trey Wisner is a running back out of the state of Texas. And he's someone that I actually got to cover when he was in high school. So for a small period of time, Trey Wisner played his football at Waco Connolly, and I was doing color commentary. And I'll just tell you what, man, every single Friday night, this dude was balling. Whether it was kick return, whether he was playing defense, whether they were handing the football, whether they were throwing him the ball out of the backfield, like he is a special player with the ball in his hands. I'm excited to see what he does now with potentially more carries coming his way with no CJ Baxter in the lineup. So I'm excited about him. I think he's a really good player. Jarrett Gibson is a guy who was obviously very, very highly touted out of high school, as most of these guys were that end up going to Texas. He's a little bit more of the compact, lower center of gravity, strong build. But he was a guy that I mentioned, played at IMG. When you play at IMG, I'm not telling you that you can't have great development in other high schools. I think that's absolutely true. When you play at IMG, though, you find a lot of these guys are a little bit more refined in their skill set, a little bit more college-ready. Keep an eye on Jarrett Gibson. So Jaden Blue, I expect him to be the lead guy, but there's still a lot of other backs behind Jaden Blue that I think are more than capable to take on those secondary carries of sorts. So the future is still bright for Texas in the run game. I would also mention this. When you talk about the Texas offense, yes, they want to run the football. We've said it many times on this show. I think Sark, if you asked him with some truth serum in his system, he would say, I want to run the football until they stop it. I think that's the case. However, when you have a year 3 quarterback in Quinn Ewers, and you have the monstars that Texas has in that wide receiver room, the luxury is you can lean on your third-year quarterback. You can lean on that pass game. You still got to have the run game present, but I think a lot of what Texas wants to do in 2024, their aspirations, rest solely on the shoulders of Quinn Ewers, and for good reason. He didn't come back to just go play in the Alamo Bowl. Like, he came back to make a college football playoff run. That's what this team expects, and I think that's more responsibility on his shoulders with no CJ Baxter, but nonetheless, I think that was going to be the case anyway. You're going to ask a lot of Quinn Ewers to get you to where you want to go. Steve Sarkisian, throughout fall camp to this point, has raved about Quinn Ewers and his leadership. Going back to what I just said, being a year 3 guy, it's now time for Quinn Ewers to look like a year 3 guy. Now, he looked really solid last season, but the thing that excites me about him is his projection and his trend, like from year 1 to year 2 in that system. From what I could tell, it was night and day. Like, yes, from an output perspective, that's one part of it, but also just like a consistency perspective. Like, there were times Quinn Ewers' first year at Texas when they went to Oklahoma State where, like, I didn't know who I was going to get. I think against Oklahoma State, he had something like 30 incompletions. And there's other variables that bake into that game itself, from the conditions to people talking about what was or wasn't right with him physically. At the end of the day, Quinn Ewers and his progression, both as a leader and as the guy in the system, is what excites you as a Texas fan. So hearing he's continuing to ratchet it up from a leadership perspective, a guy who, from what I can tell, is more often a little more soft-spoken, a little quieter. His leadership is a massive factor for them as they want to go and find their way to Atlanta. Let's just call a spade here. That is the goal for this team, and I think Quinn Ewers and his leadership is a massive part of that. Speaking to the wide receiver room, y'all, they may legitimately be 6 deep in that room. And one thing we say a lot about Sark, if you give him the ingredients, he will cook. If you give him the proper personnel to execute his system, throwing the football downfield, he will be great. You got the right guys back on the offensive line to protect your quarterback, got a third-year quarterback, and you got dudes to get the rock to. From a Jonte Cook to guys that took through the portal, from a Silas Bolden to a Matthew Golden to Isaiah Bond. They got a lot of real deal ability. They're not just taking some flyers on these guys. Like, these are guys that have all produced at a high level at their respective spots. Isaiah Bond being the guy that I expect to be wide receiver 1. Also, don't sleep on Ryan Wingo. Young buck, true freshman, had a big spring game, got there early. Excited about him. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, coming out of the spring, the concern was, okay, what's the defensive line depth like? Like, we like Alfred Collins. We feel good about that second and third level of the defense, but what's like the depth like in the trenches? Because you lose a Tavondre Sweat and a Byron Murphy, 2 All-American defensive tackles. Dudes like that do not grow on trees, to put it simply. Went to the portal, got some more pieces. And depth, I don't think, is the concern so much as the question is, okay, well, how do we put these platoons together? Because, you got to have tremendous depth is one part we already mentioned, but like being able to pair pass rushers and run stuffers and just have the right makeup from the first unit to the second unit, and when you rotate them in and out, especially in the SEC, like that's the thing to watch for, I think. So again, well worth the membership over at Inside Texas. Got a scrimmage this weekend. We're going to learn a little bit more about Texas as well as a number of other teams across the country. So keep it locked right here, but get a membership at Inside Texas for all your Texas intel. Again, that's the On3 Texas site. $1 using JD1 for your first month. It's like stealing. But Texas, man, they're fired up. They're angry. And if you're a Texas Longhorn fan, to hear about the lack of complacency and the aggressive nature, competitive edge, those are all good things and all things that I don't know that you saw at Texas, give or take 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So fall camp is rolling. Love to see it. Intel is intel at this point in the game, but y'all, we are so close to actual football games being played. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.